the value of priming movements prior to doing some larger movement for a specific muscle group. And in this case, the study was about glute training.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, why prime? Yes. And where does it fit into the bigger picture? And is this really about, what is this about? Is it about injury prevention? Is it about neural activation? Mm-hmm. Is it about, what is it about?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where this came from. So let's talk about priming.
Yeah, because I think that's a big discussion. There's a lot of, we've talked about warming up in general, like what does warming up even need to look like? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's kind of the two camps of people that feel like you need to prime and do all these exercises every single time.
I don't know. I just don't like the term priming. I think it's stupid. I think it's lame. I think it's like a term that people just throw around. And it's not, I don't even think it's like a term that's even used within our professional discourse. I feel like it's a word that
no, it's an industry word.
But I feel like it just came up within like the last, 15 years, 10 or 15 years. Like I never learned about, to me, priming is like fucking toning.
Yeah. So I hear you. And I love where you're going with that. So it's interesting you said that.
I don't know why I'm so passionate about it.
It's okay. I love the passion.
That's why I just turned the cameras and told you on and told you to turn the mics on, because this started to get interesting. So I would ask this, and I've said this about the word core. We were talking about core training was all things abs. That term didn't even exist when I started in this industry and it arrived, right? And now it is an industry term. So at what point, CeCe, do you accept that priming is, an industry word at this point and is accepted by the majority? I'm not saying you have to. This is I'm poking the bear here.
Yeah, it's fine.
But at the same time, that's fine if we accepted that, if we're accepting it. Now fucking explain to me what it is. Give me the definition.
Yeah, convince me. Tell me the definition of what priming is, and don't just use it as a collect-all kind of a word. I think that was the thing with core for me for a very long time when people used the term core. I want to do my core work. Yeah. It's like people were using it synonymously with abs, and they weren't necessarily using it as more of a global type of conception when you're talking about using glutes and lats, and then talking about crossbody, mechanics and slings and those types of things. Yep. So when you put it in that terminology, when you're using those types of things to explain it, I get it. Okay, that makes sense. But if you're just using the term core to talk about your abs or to do back extensions, that doesn't make sense to me. And to me, I think it's like...
You think priming follows under that same thing?
Unless you give me a definition as far as that, it makes sense. Because the way I hear Gen Pop using priming, I'm going to go prime to do whatever. Like, I'm going to do my crab walks because I'm going to do that first before I do my deadlifts because I'm going to feel my glutes more. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, I don't know. That sounds like layman's term. Like,
okay. That's fair. I agree with you that it is like a term that's being tossed around, and I don't think people really understand what it is. So if we had to define it, how would you define it, Ryan? Like what when you hear the people saying the word prime, whether it's a Gen Pop or even another coach, what comes to mind for you?
I think priming, I think of kind of two aspects of it. Is one aspect of it is building connection to specific tissue or muscles, whether that's blood flow or like neural connection to that area, specifically before a workout, so priming that. But then I also think there's kind of the other end of priming, which is priming movement, which is priming a specific, practicing the movement.
So how is that different from a warm-up and then a build set?
That's a great question.
Warm-up and a build set. So I would think, that's part of the warm-up. Is that how it's just a term of where a priming, that's going to be used as almost like activating or ramping up. Where a warm-up, that could include more mobility or flexibility drills or things like that.
But that seems very general.
So that's what I'm saying.
They are general, yes.
So it sounds like the semantics.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So what comes first, the warm-up or the priming?
That for me, if you really want me to dive into it, that definitely depends on the individual.
Okay, so let's go back though. So I think, we said, how would you define it? Yeah. And you're going a different direction. This is exactly why I wanted to turn record on for this. So because I hear people using the term too, and for me, this has just always been my approach. Like I always try to keep in mind who is the person saying it.
Yes.
Who am I talking to, and where is this conversation going? Right. So I don't want to get into a deep, conversation with somebody who probably doesn't have the ability to go there, right? Yeah. Like what's the breadth and depth of their knowledge, wisdom, and ability to have this conversation. So I'm going to accept a few things that they may say that I don't necessarily agree with.
It may not be 100% accurate.
It may not be totally accurate because I can kind of make some assumptions that I think I know what they're talking about because I've had so many of these conversations over time. This goes back to the core. Like, I hear what you're saying. You're missing a lot of things, but I get what this is. And so that we don't get into a deep discussion, and I don't want to get into a deep philosophical or anatomical discussion. I'm just going to kind of let that go and accept. And that's what's happened, right? That's kind of how we got here.
Yes.
So I'm going to go back to the question, like, what's the difference between a warm-up and priming? And what do you think people think about those two things?
Okay. Well, I mean, are we talking about other coaches, about the typical
It's a great
coach?
That's a good qualifier.
Okay.
That's a good qualifier. So let's start with the coaches.
Okay. I think the typical coach thinks of priming as like warming up specific tissues. It's starting to ramp up into the workout. So maybe that follows the warm up of what a lot of coaches would think. And priming is ramping up to literally prepare for the given movement you're about to do.
So as a coach, I'm going to ask you, what does that mean? Ramping up and warming up tissues.
So for my opinion, or what the typical coach, because I know that I'm going back and forth on that because I may think of this.
This is the discussion, yeah. So do it.
I mean, for me,
give us both perspectives.
Yeah. So I think how I view it is building a feeling or a connection to an area that they may not be connected to. And it's not necessarily, again, that it's going to increase performance, but for me, I feel like I see a big increase in the ability to recall back to that priming exercise they just did and applying it to their current movement.
Okay. So we're not actually talking about something you can measure.
No.
Right? It's
subjective.
It's very subjective. And that's what I was trying to get to. Priming is subjective in this case. And what I hear you talking about is what a lot of people would refer to as the mind-muscle connection.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? And there is some subjective and objective data around that. How objective you can get with that, I don't know. There's been a lot of stuff done there, though, where people, when you talk about intention and that mind-muscle connection and putting more intention, like a focused intention into what you're supposed to be doing, they can get more muscle stimulus, and that which turns into strength hypertrophy that can be measured. Still a little subjectivity there, but I think it's the mind-muscle connection is what I hear you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, and when I'm putting someone, especially let's say someone who's new to exercising or new to working out with me even, because that's a big difference for me as well, is I'm always putting these pieces of this puzzle together to get them to the movement and the engagement that I want through this specific movement.
Roger that.
Whether that is muscle activation or position, you can try to coach someone if they're learning a deadlift for the whole time to engage their lats, and you can give them all the cues you want and think of all the fancy things. But for me, I have seen so much success having someone do a banded pullover to an extent that where they pull their hands into their hips in a similar position as holding the barbell. And I can help them, hey, remember the exercise we just did in this last sequence? You felt those lats firing? I want you to fire that muscle in this movement right now. So whether that's the glutes or the triceps or whatever you want to do, I mean, but that for me being able to recall and teach someone as they're learning a skill, right? They're learning to walk so that now they can run and apply that. So that's how I utilize that movement. So I do it a lot when I'm priming. It's positionally with engagement. So yes, there's some crab walks. That's kind of a different discussion. But if I want you to feel what hip extension feels like and how do you load your hips in a kneeling position before I get you into a standing position and add more joints and more movements, that's how I'm going to recall to teach you, hey, remember that thing we just did where you sat your hips back to the wall behind you on this simpler version of this exercise? We primed that. We ramped that up. So now that you can apply this to your deadlift or whatever we're doing now. That's
a very smart and clear answer that from a coach, right? Mm-hmm. That is not what you're going to get from a person. So is that not also warming up?
Yes. I mean, for me,
again, a very general term.
Yeah.
It's so funny, semantics, because I don't know, people ask me like, what's the name of this exercise or what's the exercise care? I'm like, I don't care what the name of the exercise is. I know what I'm trying to accomplish. Right. So the same thing for me, like warming up, priming, like warming up. Okay, are we feeling actual core body temperature running? Are we feeling blood flow? That a lot of people might think of that. I call this a warm up for my client over here who's really stiff. Your warm up is going to be focused on mobility and gaining new ranges of motion. your hypermobile or hyperflexible client over here, my warm up for you is going to be a lot of stability, priming, things like that. So I can create your awareness of your limbs and things like that. Tension. Because so for you firing your glutes, you doing a practice set, you doing a balancing exercise so you can feel what it is like to have distal awareness to your limbs and actually be able to control your limbs in space, because a lot of hypermobility people don't have that awareness, right? They lack proprioception and awareness. So for me, my warm up is doing that. So really, I don't give a fuck what the difference is between priming and warming up. They're the same. I know what I'm trying to accomplish as a coach, and that's what you should learn as an individual. Where do you see benefit from? Are you someone who's really rigid, really, really stiff, and you need to do 4 mobility drills or flexibility drills into mobility drills so that you can get into the positions that you need to because you can't squat how low you want to be able to? Or are you someone who you have a big issue feeling your specific muscles firing into this movement? And how do you apply these muscles into the movement you're trying to do? And then the experienced person like myself or you guys, we know that on day A, it may look like this. My warm-up may be 10 activation drills. It may be, I really feel disconnected from this. I need to fire this. Or on this day, it may be 3 movements that I just feel good to go. I'm connected. I'm firing. I'm amped up. Let's fucking get after it. So it's going to be different based on the day, on the individual. And that's your job as the coach, to be able to see that for the individual in front of you.
Yeah, so this is a conceptual thing, and that's where I really wanted to get to and not go through the study.
Yeah.
Because the study says some things, and I had some really specific questions right off the bat. Like, well, who are they studying?
Yeah.
Like, and in that particular study, we won't get into it.
Yeah.
It was highly trained rugby athletes. I mean, these fucking dudes are beasts, man.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're talking about knee stability after glute activation, exercise, priming, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't change knee stability. How the fuck are you measuring that? And who are you measuring?
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about Mary Jones, right, who's that hypermobile or really stiff person, like, you can't tell me that there's no value in it when in this study was basically, there's really no value in it. It doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Again, without getting, I just brought it up when I said I wasn't going to, but that was kind of the gist of what started this conversation. I love what you just did right there, because what you really talked about was the concept, and you demonstrated a deep understanding of the concept, which is which I think is the challenge or the trap that people fall into, is they're like, I've just been told, here's my set of instructions for how to prime.
Yes.
With no concept of what that word may or may not mean in general, at more of a professional level, but also more specifically, and the most important thing, for them.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a higher level awareness of themselves. So, we get into these, like, I see programs are like, here's the priming program for your shoulders. Here's the priming program for your hips.
And it's basically just going through the motions for a lot of individuals if they don't have that deeper understanding of what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it.
And there are levels to this, and you just sort of alluded to some of those with regard to who it is you're working with, what their challenges are, mobility versus hypermobility versus lack of strength versus lack of awareness. Those are all concepts that go into the warm-up. When we hear, like, what's the purpose of a warm-up? Well, the warm-up is there to prepare the mind and the body for what we're about to take it through. Well, if you just leave it at that, that's fucking basic. Like, that's what basic bitches would say. Like, and that's fine. Like, you can put that out there and it's not wrong, but it's also very shallow.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of other questions that need to be asked. Like, what are we warming up for? Who is it that's warming up? What is this person's workout, training, injury, health history? Where are they today versus where they were yesterday? All that stuff. And I'm not trying to overcomplicate this or whatever else, but again, it frustrates me when I hear, like, oh, well, I have this priming routine. Okay, that's cool. Let me hear about it. Well, we go in and we do what we do is some FRC. So here's a different question, right? So in terms of the layers or the levels that exist here, like, people would look at, like, a functional range conditioning, or when we start to go through, like, ODOAs. Is that priming or is that exercise? Right? And what am I choosing as my qualifier for whether that is priming or is exercise? Because I put it at the beginning of my workout, it's priming. If I put it at the middle of my workout, then it's exercise.
And then at the end, it's a cool down.
Then it's exactly. So again, that's a lack of understanding, I think.
Well, I love that. I was actually going to bring up when CeCe and I were talking about this whole topic the other day, she brought up a good point. And I think what a lot of people, whether it's the glutes, which is a common one, or any other tissue, a lot of times something that you feel like you need to constantly prime is probably just because it's weak and you need to do more exercise for that thing. So yes, maybe you don't feel your glutes aren't doing their job in your squat because you're quad dominant, because you have weak glutes. Not necessarily that you have gluteal amnesia or something like this, but priming that, if you find that you need to prime, maybe you just need to actually include more exercise exercises. So I think about it for the upper body, a lot of us priming our back, or, whatever it's in movement, retraction of the movement of the scapula.
Doing a couple rows before I go do my back day.
Exactly. So maybe if you always have to do that and you really just feel this imbalance, maybe you're just not rowing enough at enough intensity. So it's finding that sweet spot, that balance of, are you just weak in that? Do you need connection? All that kind of stuff as well.
So is priming bullshit?
I think it depends on who it is and how they're applying it.
It depends.
Right? So as far as, if Ryan is what he just articulated, if that's what somebody is thinking when they're going through methodically their
process
priming, their process,
and it helps build that connection.
Then okay.
Fuck yeah.
But
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. If that's a helpful term for you to make that mind muscle connection going into your workout, and I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm going to leave it there with the mind muscle connection. That is your personal awareness. Hard stop.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Like, do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I ready for what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yes.
And am I confident that I can go into that and get the most out of what I'm supposed to be doing today? Call it whatever the fuck you want. Doesn't matter.
Exactly.